Okay, it looks like the majority of you like to get produce from your garden, which is great. And then we also have the grocery store and the farmer's market. Okay, thank you everyone for participating in my little polls. So hi everybody, my name is Sophie from Spark Policy Institute, and thank you for joining us again today. Today's webinar, which is jointly hosted by the Colorado Farm to School Task Force, Spark Policy Institute, and Healthy Farms, Healthy People Coalition, is called Making Evaluation Easy, Reporting Results for Your Farm to School Evaluation. We've got everybody on, almost everybody who's registered, so we're going to go ahead and get started. A few housekeeping points one more time so that everybody's on the same page. There are two ways to hear audio for today's webinar. One is automatically through your computer speakers, and the other is via the teleconference line using the call-in number listed on the screen. We do currently have all participants in the audio conference on mute to reduce background noise. We will not be holding a verbal question and answer period, but instead we'll be asking people to type into the chat box at the right side of your screen. When you do send a chat, please make sure to select Send to All Panelists so that both Lynn and I can see your responses. Unfortunately, participants cannot see each other's chats, but we will be reposting them into the chat box so that we can all learn from each other. And I do want to let you guys know that today's webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be posted on the Colorado Farm to School website in a few days. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to our presenter, Lynn Kathleen from Spark Policy Institute. Lynn?
Thank you, Sophie, and welcome back, everyone. So today is our last webinar of our 5-part series, and this really is wrapping it all up, all of that good evaluation planning that you've been doing, and so theoretically, and collecting the data and analyzing the data ultimately leads to how do you report it out. And so today we're going to dig into that because there are many, many different formats for reporting, and there's many different ways to select what is the best one. So let's get going on that. But of course, first, just a reminder, this comes to you from the Colorado Farm to School Task Force with Spark Policy Institute. And this particular series is hosted by the Healthy Farms, Healthy People Coalition, and thank you very much to them. And Sophie and I will be conducting today's webinar. Sophie is a research associate here at Spark Policy Institute, where she provides research and evaluation services, focusing on food security, nutrition, health, and education. And my name is Lynn Kathleen. I'm a director at Spark, and I have over 25 years of experience in academic and applied public policy research, and I am the lead staff to the Colorado Farm to School Task Force. Spark Policy Institute develops innovative, research-based approaches to help our partners solve complex societal problems that defy easy solutions. So, in fact, we get to work on really fun things, and we are really happy to be able to do our work in food systems, and particularly in farm to school. The task force was legislatively mandated in 2010 by the Colorado General Assembly, and it has 15 appointed members. It is charged with increasing the use of local farm and ranch products in school food service programs to improve child nutrition and to strengthen our local and regional agricultural economies. The task force receives no funding from the state of Colorado. However, it has successfully attracted a wide array of funders. Starting with the federal RS stimulus grant, it currently has 2 generous grants from the Colorado Health Foundation and the Gates Family Foundation. In 2012, the task force identified a major gap in farm-to-school programming here in Colorado. We simply had very little information about what our districts were doing, and the districts engaged in farm-to-school were not systematically assessing their activities. So to address this gap, the task force, along with Spark, developed the Farm to School Evaluation Toolkit for Colorado. And with a 2-year USDA Farm to School grant, this toolkit is now being rolled out nationwide through in-person workshops and webinar trainings. Just a reminder, for those of you who successfully complete the five webinar series, we have available to you 5 contact hours of continuing education, and these come through the Commission on Dietetic Registration, which turns out is the credentialing agency of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Many professional associations will accept their continuing education credits. To be eligible for the credits, you will have needed to participate in all 5 of the webinars and taken both the pre- and post-series survey. Everyone should have taken the pre-webinar series, as it was sent out early on. After today's training, you will be directed to a survey which will include a question about whether you're applying for CE credits. If you are, then you will receive a post-series test to take that so you can get your CE credits. So speaking of prior webinars in the series, let's do a quick poll to see how many have participated in any of all of our previous webinars, either live or by watching it on live from our archives. I'm going to hand it over to Sophie now.
Okay, everybody. So by now you probably are familiar with the polling panel at the right side of your screen. I have opened it up, and what we're wondering is which of the webinar series to date you've attended, and that's I've seen all 4 previous webinars in the series, I've seen some but not all, and this is the first webinar in the series that I've attended. This could also apply to any of the archive versions that you saw. I'm going to go ahead and leave this open for a few more seconds. Okay, great. So it looks like the majority of you have seen some but not all of the previous webinars, and we have about 1/3 of you who have seen all 4 of the previous webinars.
Great. Well, it doesn't really matter if you've seen them all or if you've seen some or even if it was your first. This particular webinar is going to be useful to all of you. And, of course, you can always go back to our archives to learn more about the previous ones. In today's webinar is the last in this 5-part series of the Farm to School Evaluation Toolkit training. All the previous webinars are linked onto this particular link on our website, and of course we will send out a direct link after this recording is done, probably tomorrow. I want to remind everyone that upon completion of today's webinar, we will be sending out the presentation with all of the slide notes. So as always, what I want you to do is actually not try to type everything I'm saying, because I like to share a lot of information and it would be hard to keep up. Rather, just jot down notes of those particular things that really catch your interest, that you want to ask questions about, and that you want to follow up on your own past this particular webinar training. So sit back and enjoy and listen and let your brain just go crazy with thoughts. Okay, here we go. Today we're going to start with a quick overview of last week's webinar, Collecting and Analyzing Data. We'll look at different types of presentation formats and how these relate to the purpose and audience, and we'll have some simple criteria to consider to help select the best format for sharing your results. And we'll take a look at graphics. We'll end with Q&A, and then for those who want to dive deeper into graphics, we have what we call a bonus presentation at the end of this hour that you can attend live, or if you don't have time to stick with us today, you can watch it online later. By the end of today's webinar, you should have increased knowledge about your using of evaluation and creating different presentation formats. You will have increased your confidence to present the results, and for those of you who are going to take continuing education credits, you'll be at the end of the training and ready to graduate. So let's take a real quick look at where we have been. Let's first start with a brief review of the Evaluation Toolkit. So the Evaluation Toolkit overview walks you through each step of the evaluation process that we cover in these training series. We begin with the overview of the toolkit and filling out step 1 in the very first webinar. In week 2, we identified outcomes and target audiences for your evaluation. In week 3, we focused on step 3 and began step 4. Last week, we worked on step 4 and 5, and today we'll be looking at how to use your evaluation results. Before we get started on this week's training, I want to do a quick reminder of what we looked at last week that's particularly relevant to what we'll do this week. So last week, we delved into the implementation stage of evaluation. Specifically, we covered what a quantitative and qualitative research design would entail, paying close attention to how you select your participants, which is also known as sampling. We also discussed a couple of the most popular data collection methods, surveys for quantitative and interviews for qualitative, and we looked at the practical components of conducting both, including online survey sites that could be used to help automate and ease the data collection process. Finally, we introduced methods for analyzing data, using spreadsheets for counting responses and for content coding open-ended or interview data, using online survey tools like SurveyMonkey for generating basic descriptive statistics like frequencies, and graphics for quantitative data. And we also reiterated the purpose of when you use quantitative data and when you use qualitative data, noting that by its nature, qualitative data should not be presented as numbers because its purpose is to learn the whys and the how comes, not the whats and the how manys. So last week we talked about how to analyze quantitative data and qualitative data. Now it's time to use those results. But there are many ways to present results. It's not as confusing as it may seem. First step is that, like I often say in these trainings, go back to your evaluation plan, think about the outcomes you've selected to measure, and think about your purpose. So the very first thing is to begin jotting down, what is the purpose of your evaluation? Is it for program improvement? Share information with stakeholders, report to your funders. There are some standard presentation formats that fit these different purposes. Which people do you intend to share the results with? Here we're talking about naming specific individuals, not just a group of people. Knowing who you need to reach out to will help you hone in on which information to share. As you put together your results, you'll want to check in with a few key people that you want to reach and find out their preferred formats. When are the results needed? Evaluation by its nature is about informing next steps. What do you want to inform, and when are those results actually needed to do the informing? Finally, you'll consider the different presentation formats, and we're going to discuss those today. So let's dig a bit deeper into each of these considerations. Your evaluation plan identified its purpose. However, there are a variety of reasons why your purpose may have changed or even shifted over the course of the evaluation, including new opportunities such as the release of a grant request for proposals. If you originally were collecting data for program improvement, you could rethink that data from the perspective of demonstrating need for more support or capacity to expand a program. Your purpose naturally led to the identification of your audience for the results. So if you were doing a program improvement for your school garden, the audience would be the school garden leader and others involved in the garden program. But you'll see a lot of great information coming out of your evaluation that you might want to consider sharing beyond that original target audience. To do that, though, you'll need to think about who these people or groups are, how do they typically receive their information. If it is a decision maker in the upper administration, for example, you'll want to be sure you have 1 or 2-page executive summary because they're very busy and they tend not to be able to take the time to read in-depth reports. While you may not think of Farm to School as being controversial, sharing evaluation results with recommendations and action steps, and more on that shortly, could be high stakes or sensitive. High stakes could include things like meeting a funder's requirements and adequately demonstrating the value of the program. And recommendations need to align with not only what your evaluation results support, but what your stakeholders are willing and comfortable to do. Finally, think about whether the results you're sharing will be surprising in a good or a worrisome way. Don't be caught off guard. It's important to anticipate how your audiences will respond. Timing is everything, as the saying goes, but in evaluation, this really is true. Evaluation is intended to inform decisions and lead to actions. Your evaluation plan included an overall timeline. Remember that start and end date? For your evaluation activities, and each of your data collection steps included a timeline as well. But now we are talking about those opportunities to make your efforts actionable. Likely you have in mind, or you should, some initial decisions to inform, but what else is happening and when is it happening? If you have missed, say, an opportunity to present your results to a stakeholder group you feel strongly could benefit and can benefit your program, is it really too late? Or is there another opportunity, even one that you could make happen? It is important to identify when sharing your results really is too late. Knowing that drop-dead deadline will keep you focused and on time. And oddly, there are circumstances when sharing your results is too soon. So if you're asking teachers to use the school garden for academic activities in the following year and you say approach them during standardized testing time, that can simply be a waste of your time, and information that you try to impart upon them will not stick. And finally, delivery of your results. Different audiences are predisposed to different information formats. Know your audience's preferences and share your results accordingly. Much more will be said about this today, so let's move on. Okay, let's check in with you on these considerations. In the chat box, let me know one or more of the following. Do you see any possible new purposes for your evaluation? If so, what? What about audiences are you now considering that are other audiences that could benefit, maybe ones you haven't thought of before? Who is that? What about timing? Are you thinking about some new opportunities that you might be able to use to present these results, or maybe some grants to apply for and how those timelines need to be incorporated into your work now? Let us know and let everyone know. And of course, since we can't all see the chat box, we will be reading them as they come in. So let's start sharing, because again, what we have found is that if you're thinking of it, then it's a great thing to share, because it will either confirm other people's thoughts or inspire them to consider also. So let's do a little bit of group sharing here. And if you can, please try to remember to select the Send to All panelists, because that enables both me and Sophie to see your answers. So what are you thinking of doing? Anything, any new ideas, new purposes, some new audiences, a new critical point to consider? Okay, let's take a look. Two things. Would like to do a program effectiveness evaluation and also an evaluation of what kids who participate in programs learn. So changes in attitudes, knowledge, and so on. So what I really hear is that you are very interested in kind of expanding maybe what you were originally considering doing. So this is an interesting kind of juncture to be thinking about. If you haven't already started, by the way, if you haven't already started your evaluation, then of course this is a great time to be thinking about such new ideas and creating your evaluation plan appropriately for that. If these are things that you would like to know, but you maybe have already gone pretty far down the road on your evaluation, then what you want to do is think about, are there things in the data we've already collected that can begin to tap into these different aspects that we hadn't really considered before, but you know, maybe we actually have collected some of that data that can tell us some things. Here, okay, I'm waiting to see if anybody else has some great new ideas to share. Okay, let's see. Oh, by program, okay, here's by program effectiveness, you mean asking teachers their opinions. So that's a great idea, because you know, if the teachers themselves don't think the program is effective, well, one, that will tell you quite a bit. Either you're not reaching the teachers, or they're getting some feedback either through watching their children or hearing from their children that something is amiss. And so really teachers' particular understanding and their perceptions of effectiveness is very important. So, you know, you can, it is true, you could at this point go back and ask additional data collection. There's also, though, the necessity to think about, do you have time to do that or not? So you always want to kind of be realistic about, even if you have missed an opportunity to collect data, does it belong in this particular round, or can you put it to, say, next semester, or can you learn something from what you've already collected? Another one. Though we traditionally have a major focus upon reporting to funders, so oversight, compliance, and outcomes, we have started and will continue providing findings back to the program staff for program improvement purposes. So I love this, because what I hear is that this particular program has a very, kind of set way of knowing how they need to talk to their funders, and that's how they've been doing their evaluation. But now they're also starting to think about, this can be used for program improvement. And the thing is that you actually really can design your evaluation in ways that can do both. And so, so that's great. I like that a lot. Okay, so we should move on because we have a lot to cover today. And thank you. Oh, wait a minute, one more. To communicate findings to parents to promote school efforts to increase healthy eating. So this is great because my guess is that there are likely things you have collected that now you can think about, well, maybe I hadn't thought about how to reach parents and tell them about it, but now I can. And so this is great. These are all wonderful ideas, and I want you to think about that. So I know early on when we first started all of this training, we really talked a lot about, who was going to be your audience and your purpose and really focus carefully on that. And I am still going to, kind of drill that down for you. But I also don't want you to become so completely narrow and rigid that you can't think beyond your original purpose. There are opportunities often in your data that go beyond what you originally were intending it for. And so, be flexible. See if that's an opportunity for you. Okay, let's keep going. So now we're going to shift our attention to thinking about the purpose of your evaluation, how that drives the way you will use your results, and the types of actions you might want to take. If you're using evaluation for program improvement, for example, maybe you are a food service director who wants to understand if local fresh food is changing eating behavior of students and which foods or recipes are most successful. So a technical report that shows details about the placed weight study, survey results of students' ratings on new foods or recipes can provide the information needed to make minor or even major changes in the implementation of your farm to school in the cafeteria. You may be wanting to help the volunteer garden leader improve upon their methods and the sequencing of their garden skill development of different age children. In that case, you might want to share the results in more of an executive summary format, where you're really summarizing the key findings in maybe 1 or 2 pages. Or maybe you are evaluating teachers' use of the garden and want to see their lessons, if their lessons are tied to the garden and how their lessons are tied to a garden and a youth farmers market, and whether it's resulting in increased math and science knowledge and how the children learn best in experiential settings. In that case, you may want to share the results through a workshop with the teachers. There's a lot there to dig down into, and so really that would be a very interactive kind of sharing of the evaluation results to really get to figure out how to use them best. Or you may want to help your producers maximize their benefits of selling to school and hosting farm field trips for the students by evaluating the level of community awareness and, say, support of their school efforts and increase sales at farmers markets. In that case, really an informal format like maybe a memo that's free of evaluation jargon and just provides straightforward, down-to-earth results is a really good choice. These and other types of program improvements that are revealed by the evaluation findings should be viewed and communicated as an opportunity to make the program better. Evaluation results that indicate the need for improvement should not be communicated as an indictment of the failure of a program. Rather, an excitement should be generated about the possibilities of developing an even stronger set of program offerings and improving upon already successful efforts. Regardless of the format, an action plan should be developed based upon the results and communicated to implement these improvements. An action plan is, as it sounds, action-oriented, and the directives set forth in the plan should be very specific and focused on achieving a very targeted goal. So the following is an example of a task-specific suggestion. Here, the program evaluation may suggest that connecting with parents on a more consistent basis is needed and that parents like to use technology. In response to this finding, the evaluation team may decide to focus on parent connections in a more directed way by creating an electronic parent informational newsletter. The task-specific suggestion is the creation of the newsletter as the specific action or to-do item. When it comes to sharing with stakeholders, many different formats are appropriate, but you'll notice these are the shorter versions or lend themselves to educating your stakeholders. Here you're likely to be reaching out to parent-teacher groups, school principals, school boards, health organizations, local community organizations, and even elected and appointed officials. Some of the reasons for informing the stakeholders at the local level include to help raise awareness about your program, develop support for the program, to attract volunteers, funding, and in-kind resources for your program, and to help lobby for policy or program changes to build a stronger farm-to-school program. Specifically, you may be wanting to share with the community and stakeholders how farm-to-school activities support students' healthy eating, nutrition and food systems education, or academic achievement. Or maybe you want to demonstrate how your local procurement by the school is supporting the local economy. Good ways to share this type of information could be through a one-page, say up front and back, fact sheet with findings and pictures, or maybe some PowerPoint slides or fact sheets to be used to present your findings at existing meetings, or even a short video that maybe your students help put together. Sharing with stakeholders does not end there. It can and should include next steps or that action plan. So let's say that your farm-to-school evaluation focused on assessing the strengths and successes of its first school garden. The evaluation was able to point to specific components that made the garden so successful, and the evaluation planning team felt that the model could be expanded to other gardens and other schools. The action plan strategy here would include assessing the interest of principals in the district to find out which administrators are most supportive. Prioritize among those schools who have a supportive principal, maybe based on how ready a school is to take on a garden. For example, do they have the space? Do they have access to water? That would be good to be the basic minimum where a school needs to start. Identify and recruit those who will help with the garden, and create and implement the process by which the garden will be supported. Maybe your purpose was to inform funders. These might be community foundations, state foundations, or even national foundations. Your final report can just be a short document summarizing the evaluation findings with a technical appendix for those who are interested. Many times the best way to share information with funders is actually to meet with them in person and just have that personal conversation. When they get to see your enthusiasm and get to talk to you about it, that actually starts to build the very kind of relationship you really need to have in order for funders to care about your program and really see the value to them. When you are sharing with funders, your objectives are to show how your farm-to-school program aligns with their priorities, or to report back to your funder how you are meeting their grant goals, or show how you are making progress towards sustainability. Grantors are very interested in seeing how their money can start and build up a program, but not be the sole source of funding indefinitely. And then finally, maybe it's to show the funder that there's tremendous community support and you have developed strong relationships with key partners that are critical to the success of your farm-to-school program. Again, you'll want to have an action strategy. So let's say you're interested in pursuing funding from a foundation you have never worked with before. Your action plan might include some research to determine which of the foundation's programs best fits with your farm-to-school activity. Identify the appropriate program officer and meet with them. Bring your materials to share, but also a few other people who could show the passion and commitment for your farm-to-school program can be compelling to the funder. And of course, after the meeting, follow up with the program officer, thanking them for the opportunity to share your program and letting them know your next steps, such as an intent to submit a funding request. Okay, so let's take a look at how communicating your evaluation results will be important in the way that you do it. We're going to start with some information criteria and then provide some examples. Another way to think about which presentation format to use is to consider the audience, what the evaluation is intended for, and what the evaluation revealed. So it's kind of this combination rather than just thinking about the purpose or just the audience. So let's get started in trying to think about this kind of way of setting up your criteria for selecting your formats. So for example, the more that your audience is external, tends to want information in more formal formats. You need to demonstrate accountability. The stakes are high. Your results are surprising or maybe even negative. The timing is not critical. You can use the information in many different venues, but you are unlikely to have in-person meetings. In that case, the more likely you'll want to use what we call the more formal methods of sharing your results, which are typically in written formats such as reports and memos. Let's consider the evaluation report because many of you will be doing those. There are really 4 tips that you'll want to follow, and these will make your life a lot easier. So first is, do not wait to draft your evaluation report or outline your presentation until the very end of your project timeline. Indeed, a great deal can be done even before you have collected the data. For example, background sections can be written, the description of your farm-to-school program being evaluated, the purpose of your evaluation, the outcomes to be assessed, the key questions to be answered, and the data collection tools used, and so on and so on. All those things that you don't need the results for, but you already have the information about. Just go ahead and write up those sections. Include only findings and narratives that directly address your key evaluation questions. Consider who your audience is for the report and only include information that's relevant to that audience. So if your evaluation purpose was to share information with stakeholders and inform funders, you'll likely create 2 different reports, each that is most relevant to your target audience. Concise and readable also refers to the format of your report. For example, pull-out boxes and quotes that support key findings are a fast way to get your evaluation results across. Graphics interspersed throughout a report break up the text and done well are able to convey a lot of information efficiently. And then you're going to want to share the draft of your report or presentation with members on your evaluation team and even with key stakeholders. If you include a case study, be sure you have the person who provided you with the resources or information review that section to check for accuracy. A careful review of multiple people will ensure that omissions and misinterpretations are caught before you disseminate the final product. Of course, you'll want to share your findings, but don't forget the basic information about your evaluation, stating the what, why, who, how, where, and when of your evaluation design and process that will demonstrate the rigor and credibility needed for your audiences to take your results seriously. Not all methods of dissemination will include an executive summary. However, the contents in an executive summary are applicable to many reporting formats. So let's take a look at what you would want to cover in an executive summary or any of those pieces that we'll talk about later that really use an executive summary content. An executive summary should fit within 2 pages. So it can be a 1-page front and back handout. It will include the purpose of the evaluation, the project goals, where the project is happening and its current state configuration and who is being reached, and the recommendations based on the evaluation results. Many evaluation recommendations include those specific action steps. If yours do, include them in your executive summary. Let's take a look at some other audience considerations. When your audience tends to be internal, so let's say it's your food service director or your teachers, that they want to talk about the findings as a group, that the purpose is really for learning and improving, that the results are informative but maybe not counterintuitive or particularly negative, that the results need to be used soon, and you may have only one opportunity to share the results once or a few times, then you'll likely want to use the more informal reporting methods such as presentations, handouts, or downloaded graphics and tables, say from SurveyMonkey. Last week, I showed you a screenshot from SurveyMonkey's data analysis and display functions. So I want to show you a few more features within SurveyMonkey that will help you in reporting your results, especially for these informal presentations. Let's look at the display options available on this online tool. In the previous slide, we showed the results of question 3 in the format of a bar graph. But what if that was not the graph you felt conveyed your results the best? In that case, you would click on the button Customize, and a sub-menu of options would come up. The first tab is the chart type. Maybe you prefer a pie chart. With one click, you will have it now in a pie chart. In addition to the chart type, you can customize your graphic by whether you want to show both the chart and the data table or just one or the other, whether you want to show the data on the chart and various options for your axes. You can also select colors for your chart results, choosing from a wide range of colors. Finally, you can edit your category labels. This is especially useful if your labels in the survey are really pretty long for displaying in a graph or a table. All of these options are very easy to use, and there really is no way you can make a mistake. SurveyMonkey has different export options for your data. Individual tables or charts can be downloaded as what is called a PNG file, which is a high-quality image that can be inserted into a Word document, other text editors, or appropriate for websites. You can download it as an Excel file if you want to create your own graphics using the Charts feature in Excel. You might prefer a PDF file that is ready to be shared as a report of your data. PowerPoint files are where all the information is already ready to go as a presentation. And each of these options are easy to create through the Export Question Data option. So, for example, here is a download of my survey in a PowerPoint presentation. It includes a title slide. The second slide provides the response and completion rate of the survey. And here is that question 3 in a bar chart format. SurveyMonkey and other online survey data collection tools have easy-to-use options for how to share and display your survey data. I want to continue now a little bit more on the criteria for determining the right presentation format for your results. If your audience is external but includes many different interests and stakeholders, if your audience includes stories about the program or you have pictures, if you're trying to build awareness of your program or a better understanding of its purpose and value, then you'll want to choose among what we call marketing formats, such as press releases, posting on your school website, sharing through social media, such as blogs or on Facebook. For example, the Colorado Farm to School website includes a Google map of all its Colorado districts that have farm to school programs. Here we embed the Google map on our website. The directions to do that are easy to find. Just Google it. This actually brings up another way you'll want to disseminate your results. Some of your evaluation results will be great to add to your school nutrition website or to your community partners' websites. What if your audience does not like numbers? This is not unusual but can seem challenging in sharing evaluation results. So actually, I say it's really not a problem. One of the great things about data is the ability to create graphics, and basically, these are just pictures of your data. Effective graphics not only turn the most data-adverse audiences into data consumers, they also can convey information without requiring the audience to read paragraphs of text. So for very busy people, images will catch their eye in ways that pages of words will not. Let's take a look at what types of graphics you can use and how to make them top-notch. Here's a bar chart I created from a survey that was reported in a local newspaper. We actually had 25 questions that were ranked in that survey. And while the text of the article describes the range of ranked principals, we chose to show only the top 6 in the graphic. At the right side of the bar graph, you can see the mean values are shown, and in the title, the scale range is reported. Here is a very simple line graph. Typically, you would not want to have more than 3 lines in a given graph, but a graph with even just 1 line can be very effective at telling the story of growth, as shown here. And here's a great example of a pie chart that comes from the USDA Farm to School Census. I actually love this pie chart because the entire circle shows in pink, shown in pink represents all the money spent on school lunches nationwide, and then the orange slice within the circle shows the amount that is spent locally. It gives your audience a real good opportunity to think about how much more money can be spent on local produce and how much money that, school districts really have to be spending on food. I mean, it's a tremendously huge market. This is a map of the Colorado's 178 school districts. The map shows the same data as on the Google map, but in this case, because of the way it's showing it by school district boundaries, it can show growth over time. So the Colorado Farm to School Task Force loves this map because it quickly shows how farm to school is growing by leaps and bounds in their state. This map tracks farm to school over 4 years. When the task force was seeded in 2010, there were 22 school districts out of the 178 that were doing some type of farm to school activity, which is shown in the dark green. By the end of 2011, there were 41 districts. These are the light green ones that are added. At the end of 2012, there were 64 districts shown in orange. And when we counted up the districts at the end of 2013, we found there were 98 districts, which are now the red districts that were added. This is a four-fold increase in farm-to-school engagement over the course of the 4 years of the task force. A map also has the ability to show where farm-to-school is growing. And we often talk about the dispersion of farm-to-school, where you can see that growth tends to occur in regions as more and more districts join with their neighboring districts. Okay. So this wraps up today's webinar on presenting your results, and I want to end with some polls that capture the essence of our training of these last 5 weeks. What is the evidence of quality in evaluation?
Okay, hi everybody. So I have opened up the polling panel at the right side of your screen. And I've given you 2 minutes to answer this question because there is a lot of text. But you will see that the question is, what is the evidence of quality in evaluation? And the answers are conducted by an independent evaluator, focused on the impact of the program, supported by significant time and resources, delivering results through written reports, all of the above, or none of the above. So you can go ahead and select your answers within the next minute and a half. It does look like the majority of you have answered, and some of you are still in the process of answering, so I'm going to leave it open for a few more seconds so that everybody has a chance to answer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. I think there's one person still answering, so we'll give them a few more seconds. Okay, great. So it looks like just about half of you said all of the above. About a quarter of you said none of the above. Some of you said focused on the impact of the program. And then a few of you said conducted by an independent evaluator. Lynn, what is the answer?
Oh. Excellent. So it is a bit of a tricky question. And the reason that I ask it is because, in fact, one of the things I think we often do think is all of these or many of these things need to be in place for it to be really a quality evaluation. And it's not that, if you had these things, it might in fact be a quality evaluation, but it's not required. So let's really take a look at what it is. What you really want as evidence in quality evaluation is that you always want to consider your audience, evaluation purpose, and how the results will be used. So it's that beginning part, being really thoughtful and being very clear about what this whole evaluation is for, is going to set you up for a very good evaluation. You need to be realistic about your time frame and resources. If you do that, then you are likely to actually be able to get from the beginning of planning to the end of doing your evaluation and reporting it out. You want to measure what matters, not what's just easiest to measure. And I have to tell you, there's a good many evaluation reports out there that will tell you a whole bunch of different measures, but they really aren't measures on what matters. They're just, you know, counts and things that were easy to collect. And so while those things are, you know, things you can do and likely you want to put them in there, remember this really is about that sphere of influence, those impacts, those outcomes that you care about. Really try to find ones then measure what matters, because that's what's going to make a difference here. And then finally, be systematic in your approach. Developing an evaluation plan and implementing it, following all the best practices that we have shared in the toolkit and in these webinars really will set you up for success to do an excellent evaluation. I also, of course, want to remind you about the other types of resources that we have linked in the toolkit. So while we have many things in our toolkit training that you can go right back to and review, we also know that there's some tremendously great resources out there. And these include the ones that are on this website. These are linked, hyperlinked at the very end of the evaluation toolkit overview. So please do go and take a look at those. And through our USDA grant, we are able to offer webinar participants free technical assistance in planning or implementing their farm-to-school evaluation if you're using our toolkit. So if you are one of those and you would like to take advantage of up to 4 hours of our free time, we would love to work with you. We've really enjoyed it. There's been a number of prior series participants who have actually taken us up on this offer, and it's been super fun on our end to actually get to interact with you one-on-one and really learn about the amazing programs that you all have going on. So we would love to be able to help you. Please email Sophie or email me, and our contact information is right there on this slide. So this does wrap up today's webinar and the training series. However, there is a bonus coming up just before you hang up here. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us and learned enough to conduct your own farm-to-school evaluation. Remember, if you need a refresher on any of the webinar topics, you can always go to our archives to review a recording. If you would like to receive email notifications of when the toolkit is updated, we now have a place where you can go ahead and sign up, and then when we do major updates to the toolkit, we will definitely send out an email letting you know about that. And at the end of today's webinar, like always, you will be directed to a survey to help us improve our trainings. In this post-webinar survey, you'll also be asked if you plan to apply for continuing education credits. So if you're going to do that, you definitely need to take this particular post-webinar survey. For those of you who say yes, we will contact you with a link to the post-training webinar test. And then finally, if you haven't signed up for our virtual forum, we hope that you will do. We'll do that, and we are hoping to really get some good peer group interactions going, particularly, and you know, when people really get their evaluations up and going, I think that's when this will be the most useful to you. So now I want to open it up for some Q&A, and then after we do a couple of Q&A here, if we have some, we'll go on to what I'm calling our bonus segment, which is digging deeper into the graphics. So let's just stop for a moment, see if anybody has any questions at this point. And I know it's that awkward silence time. I'm going to give you a little bit, I'm just going to give you a little bit more time. And the only reason I'm only going to give a little bit is because we will do some Q&A after the bonus segment too. But for those of you who have a question and really maybe can't hang on, although I have to say we got through this a little bit faster. So, you know, maybe all of you can hang on. We're still within our 60-minute window. So hopefully everybody can stay for the additional graphics component. Let's see if any new questions have come in. Here's one. We're really not sure where to begin. We have no funders to whom we are reporting data. We are just curious to know what children who participate in our programs are learning. So that's great. That to me sounds like you can do it a couple of different ways. So you're trying to understand if your children are learning things. So in a way, you might want to think about this as either in terms of program improvement, so just giving a frame around it, right? In terms of program improvement, because you want to know, are your kids learning? And potentially one of the things that you would do in trying to figure out if your kids are learning is you would be looking very specifically at the way that you're teaching your kids. And so that would naturally lend itself to actually, kind of doing some program improvements, switching up your curriculum a little bit or whatever. So you could think of it that way as you set up your evaluation. Okay, any others? I'll give just a few more minutes and then we'll jump into the next segment. Okay, I am going to just go ahead and jump into the next segment. If you've got a question, it's okay to just go ahead and already type it in. We'll catch it at the end of this, or if you want to just jot it down and know you're going to have a chance to type it in after we finish the next few slides here. Okay. So in addition to what we just covered in reporting results in this webinar number 5, this is what I call kind of the bonus webinar part, which will give you even more ideas of how to use your evaluation results to engage and inform your audience. So ideally, your graphic should speak for itself. That is, the person does not need to refer to the text of a report to understand the graphic they are viewing. If the graphic is in a PowerPoint presentation, likely you will only show a few of these components. However, be prepared to answer the questions about when the data was collected, the source of the data, and how the sample was drawn. Let's take a look at different types of graphics. The bar chart is a great way to show comparisons among answers. It is easy to create, whether it's in SurveyMonkey or Excel. You will always want to label your axes. You do not want to use more than 6 bars or else the graphic gets really difficult to read. You can emphasize one bar by changing its color, and you can add values at the end of the bar. So for example, here's that bar chart I showed earlier, and at the right side of the bar of the graphic, the average values are shown in the title, and in the title, the scale range is reported, where 1 equals strongly agree and 5 equals strongly disagree. So as you can see, the top-ranked New Urbanism principles receive very strong endorsements from the Stapleton residents. A person can look at only this graph and know everything about the top 6 ranked New Urbanism principles supported by Stapleton residents. A rule of thumb is that you want your graphic to tell the complete story. A person should never have to read the text to understand the picture. Here is another type of bar graph format that was used in a policy brief for local decision makers. So instead of showing only the average value, we wanted to show the percentage of how many people chose a particular ranking. We decided to display the results in the descending order with the policy that received the highest percentage of extremely or very important rating at the top, which is the green bar, and that with the smallest percentage at the bottom. Now let's consider line graphs. Line graphs are very useful for showing trends and for showing differences between groups. Here's that simple line graph to show vegetable growth over time. Typically, you would really want not more than 3 lines in a given graph, but a graph with just this one line is really effective at telling a story. So, for example, the story here. In 2005, this school harvested 100 pounds of vegetables from its school garden. In the following 2 years, it had a 3-fold increase from its first year to 300 pounds harvest. In 2008, it was even more productive with a harvest of 400 pounds. There are many wonderful stories a presenter could tell when showing this graph by describing the garden in the first year, how they changed it so that by the 2nd and 3rd years that they had more and more production, and what amazing things led to those productions. So these kinds of simple graphs really stick with people. Pie charts show proportions of a whole. Like all graphics, you must limit the number of individual components, in this case slices, to 6 or fewer in order for it to be readable. Use contrasting colors, shades of gray, or simple patterns to differentiate the slices. Always label those slices, either on the slice or in a legend. And finally, you can emphasize a piece of data by moving it out from the circle or highlighting it within the pie. Again, here's that pie chart that comes from the USDA Farm to School Census. So this chart shows 3 important things. 1, it gives a visual sense of the small piece of the pie currently spent on local food, but it also shows what looks like a small slice is actually a lot of money being spent locally, nearly $4 million. And finally, it shows the large purchasing power of school food services, $3 billion a year. There is a lot of room for growth in local purchasing just from our schools, and that translates into more money being spent locally. Illustrations convey a lot of information effectively. My favorites are maps, which can be very effective and a compelling way to show impact and even change over time. So here's our current Google map of school districts in Colorado that have farm-to-school activities. It's very simple and free to create a Google map. One of the great things about Google Maps is the ability to link a data point to your own descriptors. So for example, here we see that when you hover over the map point for Bayfield School District, you learn the source of information by which we knew they were doing farm to school, and you have their administrative address and their website. Here is that same Google map that we embedded in our farm to school website. And by the way, when you embed them into the website, when people click on it, they can also then go to a much larger version that is on the Google Maps site. And then they can pull up all of those interactive features like hovering over the data points. Again, here's that same data display, but now it's a Google map that's shown on the school district map of Colorado, and it really is great at telling the story of how I guess I would say farm-to-school diffusion happens in Colorado, how we really see it moving across boundaries, contiguous boundaries of our school districts. Information can be shown in what we call infographics, and these are a visual that's used to represent information or data. So a well-designed infographic can help simplify very complicated information. In this particular infographic, we wanted to get across the results that residents and policymakers were both highly supportive of local community planning that incorporated physical activity opportunities into land use and design. And you can see that because the green are the residents and the purple are the policymakers, and you can see you have almost the same number of little people represented there. Alternatively, infographics can show major gaps. So here, 2/3 of our residents believe that access to healthy foods is considered in community design planning, but only 11% of our policymakers say that was really the case. Yet, when we asked the opposite question, which is, should it be happening, only 5% of our residents thought that that really made any sense, but 55% of our policymakers supported it. You can see, for this particular community, they have a lot of education to do, on both sides of this. And so these kind of results can be kind of crazy and they can be kind of contradictory, but they actually tell a really good story about, you know, the level of understanding of particular policy types and where you go with that. These infographics, in this case, were used in a series of 2-page policy briefs. The policy briefs were developed from the full evaluation technical report that we created, which was actually 60 pages long. We knew that only a few of the internal staff would use that full technical report to help set priorities, yet they also wanted to share the information with community stakeholders to demonstrate where there was support for very specific policies. So each policy brief focused on a subset of policy issues that were intended for very targeted audiences. The use of infographics breaks up what can be too much text, even in a 2-page document, and it lends itself to telling part of the story in a very compelling way that should make the person want to actually read the 2-page brief. Here's a wonderful infographic, so simple, yet the takeaway is memorable and really gets across why healthy food in school really matters. And two more examples I want to share. This and the next one are more complicated infographics. However, you might have art students who will work with you. The USDA Farm to School Census infographic shows the % of kids at different ages in a given state who are targeted for farm to school activities. The youngest kids are the shortest ones, and the oldest are the tallest. The youngest are targeted more than the oldest. This is a very easy message to understand, and it tells you a really good story that where we're really putting our largest efforts in farm to school is in our elementary programs. And we really are not doing the same level of activity on farm to school by the time kids are in high school. So our high schools, in a sense, are getting shortchanged. There's all sorts of good reasons for why that is happening. But it's really important to be able to see that and then think about, is that what we want, say, our district to be doing? Would there be ways we could change it? And, and how do you engage people? Showing them that there's that kind of distribution and that uneven effort happening can really inspire people to think about what are the next steps to take. And finally, the Farm to School Census graphic that captures a couple of key takeaways in a very compelling picture. Here are 4 messages. The % of schools indicating their interest in buying local food. The most popular local foods being purchased, which is shown in those brown paper shopping bags. The number of children in our schools that would be reached by farm to school activities. Right now it's 21 million. That's a lot. And how gardens support those healthy food choices. When using infographics, you want to think about what's the story you're trying to tell and which handful of results can best tell it. Just a heads up, the USDA Farm to School Census has created beautiful and fun graphics and infographics for every state. You can use these in your evaluation report to set the stage of what's happening in your state. Just go to the Farm to School, USDA Farm to School Census site, and you will find just great data to be able to use and populate your reports and your presentations with. Finally, remember, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and here I'm talking about photographs. This is a snapshot of a policy brief that includes a graphic plus a picture. We are communicating to the audience that simply striping a street for bike lanes will not increase bike ridership significantly. Rather, it is what is called protected lanes and cycle tracks that will get the largest group of bicyclists who self-identify as interested in biking to more places but are concerned about safety to use their bikes more often. While we could just use the words of the protected lanes and the cycle tracks, we chose to show a picture because the concept is not one this community has seen, so they literally needed to know what it looked like. That wraps up our bonus webinar on graphics. So I'm going to open it up now again for the last Q&A in this webinar and in this series. We'll give you a couple of minutes to start submitting questions or comments. And I'm going to put up this slide while you do your Q&A chat box comments and questions, just so you have those links to go to our Google group forums, the archives where you will find all of the webinars, the toolkit, and how to contact me and Sophie. And of course, remember, we will be sending out these slides with their notes and the recording of today's webinar to you. So I'm going to wait for just a little bit to see if we have any more questions. Or comments. It doesn't have to be a question if you want to comment. If you want to tell me you're really excited to get your evaluation underway, that would make my day. And if you want to tell me it's still a bit overwhelming and intimidating, I get that. And, you know, we are happy to help you continue offline in doing more of this work. So here, you mentioned there are some good evaluations out there. Can you cite a few that we can look at? Yeah, actually, there's quite a few good evaluations. So actually, one of the things I was mentioning is that there's a lot of good evaluation resources out there to help you do evaluations, and that's what those 4 websites were on that one website. There are also a number of really excellent farm-to-school evaluations out there, and those are things that we're continuing to add actually to our Tools for Social Innovators Farm-to-School Evaluation Toolkit site. So that's that one that's on the Spark site. And you can go there and pull down some examples of evaluations. You mentioned, let's see, and many, oh, let's see, and many. Oh, and name some of those that are not done well. Ooh, that's a little dicey. You know, rather than name ones that aren't done well, I'd rather talk about what makes what makes an evaluation not done well. And so the kinds of things that result in an evaluation that isn't done well really are, frankly, things that go along almost opposite of everything we've talked about. But here's a great example. Doing an evaluation and really just not learning, you know, some of the basic steps of how to do good data collection. So, you know, asking questions that are like compound questions. You're really asking 2 questions in one question, and then you're trying to report out what it means. Or you have a scale that really doesn't make a lot of sense, or you haven't given them an opportunity to say, I don't know. Or you haven't checked back if you've done some interviews or did some case studies and you didn't share back the case study with whoever you interviewed for that case study, and it turns out that, you know, misunderstandings happen, or you didn't get all of the information quite right, but you went and published it. That's a good example of not doing an evaluation well. So you don't want to do those kinds of things. So, I mean, it's that kind of thing that I guess I always think makes an evaluation not done well. And then the other thing that I would say makes an evaluation not done well is when you do an evaluation where you're collecting data and writing up just to say that you did your evaluation, you can check it off on your checklist of things that I had to do, and you didn't do it to actually make a difference. You know, a lot of times, and particularly I think with funding, we just know we have to do these evaluations and we have to get back those results, and we all fall into that trap. But really, there's such a great opportunity to be able to learn so much by doing an evaluation. And so what I would hope is that everybody is inspired here to think about doing an evaluation so that it really makes a difference. And that difference can be a lot of different ways, right? And we talked about that. So do it to make a difference. Don't do it just to check it off and put it on a shelf. Figure out how those evaluation results that you have managed to produce are going to really make a difference in your farm-to-school program. And so those were actually really great questions. I'll wait for just a little bit more. We're about 6 minutes over time. Please know that we are still populating. Part of the thing that's kind of interesting about putting up evaluation reports is that we actually have to, of course, get permission to put up those reports. Some reports are internal reports, and so they can't really be shared publicly, and others are published in peer-reviewed journals, and while they are public, they actually aren't public to the entire public. And so there's different things that we have to do in order to be able to find ones we can share. That is the sad state of affairs of, you know, research and evaluation. So there you have it. With that, I don't really see anything more coming in. If you do have a question that we didn't manage to answer, please send it to me or Sophie or post it on the virtual forum. We will be, of course, participating on that forum too. And we'll try to, now that we are not so busy putting on the webinar series, we will become more busy being on the virtual forum. And that's also a place where we'll give a heads up about, you know, evaluation reports that might be great to take a look at. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for this series and part of this series, whichever component you were. And we really hope more than anything that you feel like you've walked away with some tools and some confidence to go ahead and really get started and implement your farm to school evaluation. Farm to school, as we all know, is such an important program for our kids, for our agricultural economies. And so we just hope that we can demonstrate over and over again the difference it's making, and that we can create better and better programs because we're actually looking at how they work, and we can tweak them to work even better. And we can do that when we do evaluation. So thank you, everyone. We loved having you with us. Have a very, very good week.